Good afternoon, Andreas.
Hello, John. How's it going? I was just getting set up.
Yeah. Oh, so you have two cameras. Oh, one from your laptop, probably.
Yeah, that's the laptop. I hope you can't hear the noise that's going on. There's some construction works in my apartment.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay, good.
Your microphone maybe has, the noise canceling function.
Right, that seems to work out then.
Hello, Camille. Hello, Craig.
Hello. Hey, Nick.
Hey, Nick.
Hello.
Hello, Jerry.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
All right.
Let's give it one more minute. I think Eric accepted.
Awesome.
Hello, Gregor. Hello, Yanis. Let's just give it one more minute for Eric. Well, we have a fully packed agenda today, so why not just getting it kicked off and while waiting for Eric. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Today is 2021, March 10th. This is the kickoff meeting of the Database Scalability Working Group. And first item, Jerry, would you mind giving us a quick introduction of what this working group is and what the focus will be this working group working on?
Sure. I mean, I can't say much more than hi, Eric, and what I've written on the MR. If there are any questions or comments about the stuff that's in there, I still have to flesh out the Chardon section, but I will try to finish that this week. Then I'm all ears. But I think it's worthwhile trying to set a sort of a target. And I think looking at and thinking about the database at 10x its current size is probably a worthwhile, a reasonable target to think about. So that puts our database at around, I don't know, between 70 and 100 terabytes, give or take, depending on what's in there or not. I think we're approaching hardware limits. We won't be able to scale much farther to where we are today. With the Postgres 12 migration, we'll be at the next to last largest hardware platform that we can get today in terms of virtual CPUs, with a little bit less memory than what we have today. We're going to benchmark that and all that. Beyond that, there's only one other hop. So we expect some gains from Postgres 12. We expect some gains from additional compute capacity, but this is definitely a problem that we need to start solving. I know we've had other working groups thinking about this. I wanted to propose an approach that's structural on several potential solutions. There isn't one single solution to do this. You'll notice that I've avoided calling this the sharding working group. Sharding is one of many different solutions and many different things that we can do. But anyway, that's my thinking about how we start approaching this problem.
Thank you, Jerry. Any questions about the goal of this working group? I hope everyone got a chance to read the handbook page before this meeting. Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. Actually, it's just an extract from the handbook page about the plan for this group, initial plan. Everybody can read through. That's the guideline. So far, we can, Jerry actually articulated how we execute this working group. Any questions?
I think the only one I have is, does it sound reasonable, what I put on that MR?
Yes, sir. Okay.
What I wrote there is based on how I've done this in the past. So it's purely based on what I've seen other engineers do in solving these types of problems around this type of scale. So, you know, but I'm open to certainly other approaches to tackling this.
When I first read about those patterns, I thought they're great. Those are good patterns for sure. What I was sort of concerned about is that I think we really need to find specific problems and then try to solve them using those patterns, right? So I would love to make this really a specific approach, using specific examples, and then sketching those solutions or those patterns for that. That's my only thought that I had on seeing those patterns.
Right. I included some examples, but they're by no means, you know, exhaustive. I think I wanted to defer that to this working group, meaning I laid the sort of the path of where I think we should go and how we should go. And in discussions with various people, so my own experience in terms of things that we've experienced here, try to pick some examples of either work that it's already ongoing, like CI builds, or other things that we've seen in recent times. Again, there is really no manual for this problem. Lots of people are solving this problem and everybody's doing it their own way. But in general, these are the patterns that either from experience or talking to folks that have crossed this bridge that I try to sort of summarize. And the reason why I did that is I wanted us to have several options of things that people have been doing to solve this. And I think we're starting to approach a place where there isn't one solution that's going to help this. Right, we're starting to dive into something where the sea of data that we're managing is so big that we're going to have to pick and choose. So I think you're totally right in that we should have very concrete things that we're going to be working on. But I did want to defer to the working group because you're way closer than I am to the actual problems that we're seeing. If there is another pattern that we should add, or there's a pattern that we should remove, and we have examples to do that, more than happy to create another MR to readjust things. But again, you're the experts. You're much closer to the data than I am. I'm just sort of nudging things along. So yes, open to having concrete examples added. Okay. So Jun, you want to touch on logistics?
Yeah, sorry, taking notes. So the next item will be just some logistics for this working group. The first question is a DRI. Of course, for working groups, usually we have one single DRI, but given the scale of this working group, I'm also proposing, tossing the idea here, do we actually want to one DRI per work stream? Does that make sense?
I think it does. So the way I was thinking this would move forward is Jerry is kind of the overall DRI to make sure we're making progress on this, and feel free to push back. It feels like I'm volunteering you here, Jerry. But then the broken down work streams, we do have a single DRI, like the data application layer. We talked about the memory group owning that, and logically it kind of makes sense that Camille would be the DRI on that one, because we do have the composable code base blueprint already, which aligns closely with that. And logically, it makes sense for the database team to own some of the database work that's going to be outlined there. And we have Andreas, who would be the good DRI for that. So I agree with that pattern, but if there's a different proposal that makes more sense, I'd be on board with that as well.
On my side, this is what I actually suggested in the MR itself. So I think it's a logical way of doing it. We can readjust later if we find, like initially, I think some boundaries are going to be super clear, and then some other boundaries are not. Like the data access layer is going to be kind of a loose boundary. I think it makes total sense that the memory team would be sort of working on that. But yeah, I'm all for that.
Thank you. So we will pursue the one DRI per work stream. So that will be 3 patterns. That's the 3 DRIs. Then the data access layer for now looks like the memory team already volunteered. So either Craig or Camille being a DRI for the data access layer. Then we can, once we identify the work streams, we will find volunteers or the DRIs for those work streams. Sounds good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So next question is probably too early to ask for volunteers at this time. Let's just try to identify the work streams or the patterns as the next step. Meeting time, this weekly meeting. I'm looking at the 8:30 a.m. will be 7:30 a.m. Pacific time after we switch to daylight savings time. That will be 3:30 p.m. UTC weekly. Wonder if that works for everyone here or majority of the stakeholders here. I think ideally we want to prioritize this time for Eric and Jerry. They are king of this topic, so hope others will be more flexible. How about this time? Or Jerry or Eric, do you have a suggestion of another alternative slot?
No suggestions. Seems like morning my time makes sense. There's a lot of folks in Europe and a lot of folks on the west coast of the US, so morning generally works. I think once we get going, I don't necessarily have to be here every single meeting. That would be the ideal, but I'm obviously happy to be here every time. So if I'm the only blocker, then we can schedule around that. I have an EBA, so we can ask Christy to find the best time if that's helpful.
Thank you. Okay, so I will propose the Andreas, you have a database office hour. Is it possible to shift it around?
Yes, we can look into that. This is something that the database group facilitates, so it would be nice to sort of separate that so that we can also join the working group.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
I don't think there's a working group without you.
So I'll do this. So I will propose this time to Christy, so that she can probably coordinate that with Eric's schedule. Hopefully this time slot works. If not, we'll let Christy pick a time slot that works for Jerry and Eric. Then we can adjust our schedule. So for now, don't make any change to the office hour.
Okay.
Yeah, and I definitely don't mind evenings. So if that's the only thing we find. Now I realize other folks, Andreas is here in Europe as well as Camille, I think some others. So I'm fairly malleable, but that doesn't apply to everyone.
Okay.
So I have the next topic there. Are there any blockers we need to call out beforehand? The obvious one that comes to mind is the primary key migration, right? Because I know CI builds was a topic that's brought up down below, and we can't really affect any change on the CI builds table until we migrate primary key. But I guess the question would be, and we can do it asynchronously, let's call out any blockers beforehand. Because that's something that kind of bit us on previous working groups that I've been on that blockers were called out way too late.
So what are, I know we've been talking about this on and off as it relates to Postgres 12 upgrade and all that. What is the current state of the union in terms of the primary keys issue? Because I know the clock was closer than we thought a few months ago. And the last estimate that I think I saw from Gregor's was November, October.
Yeah, so basically, I think that in this particular case, primary keys are simply more urgent. We want to resolve the problem before the end of December, or the sooner the better. We can work on partitioning CI builds in parallel, but it's a matter of capacity and urgency. So, yeah.
And the primary keys problem, this is something that the database group has picked up, and this is the highest priority for us right now. So basically, the blocker, or the problem that we have to solve is being able to run data migrations more reliably, because this is going to be a very large data migration, and this is what we're currently actively working on. Once we have that, we should be able to get this going, and this is high priority for us right now. So this is already happening. In that sense, perhaps it makes sense to let the database group run with that until we have a good solution for it, and sort of discuss the partitioning or any other more structural changes to CI builds in this working group. Would that make sense?
So is this a type problem or a partitioning problem? Or rather, I should say, are we treating this as a column type problem or as a partitioning problem?
I think that two separate problems, right?
It can be sort of folded into the same, like when you do partitioning at the same time, you can also use that opportunity to change the data type. It is primarily a data type problem that we can solve one or the other way. Right?
Okay. Well, I know you're all working on it. I'll follow.
I'll send you the link later on.
Yeah. The only reason why I'm asking is I'm usually wary of doing too many things at once.
Yep.
And I think I would like to understand some of the trade-offs between, oh, we're going to flip the type, which involves all these things, or we're going to do partitioning, which involves all these things, and then understanding, because partitioning in some respects, and based on specifically to CI builds, like the way I understand CI builds is it's an overcrowded table because we use it as a junk drawer for a ton of stuff. It has the PK issue for sure. And so trying to solve those with a single sort of thing sometimes makes sense. But when it comes to data on the database, I'm always far more paranoid than usual. Then this is why I'm asking that, because one of the things that I talk about in the working group description is there's going to be a point, and it's not too far away in the future, where we won't be talking about migrations anymore. It just won't. When we have 100 terabytes, you just won't get time to do any sort of migration. And so some of this work just sort of ends up migrating into the application itself, where the application has enough awareness to be shuffling things around. That's a very long-term thing. But once you end up in 100 terabyte land, migrations are ridiculously expensive and just not feasible. Like if you have a 10, 20 terabyte table, it just goes out the door. So we're not going to solve that right now, obviously, but it is something to keep in the rearview mirror or in the radar as we're looking at, say, CI builds. What can we learn to, how do we avoid this problem, or how do we avoid finding ourselves in migration land? Are there ways in which the application can do this? And a great example of this is the work Camille did with pages. I know it's a different problem and it's a very simple thing compared to migrating a table that is live and it's doing these things. But I love the approach of, here's this other solution, and we're going to be juggling both of them for a while. And we know it's going to, we just have to keep track of them for a while until things are where we want them to land. And I think it's a pattern that we can extend to a number of problems. Marion was mentioning another one that sounded very familiar. do that. So.
I'm kind of thinking about like very drastic approach. But this working group seems very suited for drastic approach. Instead of fixing CI build stable, fixing primary keys of the CI build stable, can we just create a new build stable that has much more efficient structure, doesn't have these legacy problems, and kind of switch over to this table and keep this table like as an archive or legacy thing?
The complication is that there is like other tables that all depend on the CI builds table, which is very large.
So can I recommend that we take this specific topic offline and we start talking about proposals going forward? Database team can continue in parallel with primary key migration, but we can start talking about the drastic proposals so we can get back to the agenda here and get through this.
Yeah, good call, Craig. Okay. Agreed.
Well, I'm just kind of planting a seed to think about different approach.
Absolutely.
Let's continue that in the Slack channel, basic. Okay, move on. Nick, DR, please verbalize your question.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the DRI discussion. It seems like something that we could assign a DRI for now would be to collect the example issues that Andreas suggested and add those to the handbook page, and that'll probably help inform the potential patterns and work streams that we've been talking about.
So I can take point on that and reach out to and sit down with folks to produce that MR.
Thank you, Jerry. Moving on to the next item, we have like 5 minutes remaining. So Q1 deliverables, at least code out the KRs there from development and infrastructure. But also, I think we are going to deliver the blueprints. So 3 patterns, that's 3 blueprints and 1 blueprint for the data access layer. And also I called out that we need to define the exit criteria for the first iteration. So are this complete for the Q1 deliverables? Anything else we want to add for Q1? This working group, I imagine, will run multiple quarters. Okay, I am seeing nothing else. So okay, that's the set. That's a goal for Q1. Moving on to next item. Jerry actually already shared one idea here. So
that's CI built, so we can skip that point because we've already talked about it a little bit.
Is this going to be a work pattern that we can just form now, or is just a one-off thing, in your opinion, Jerry?
I'm sorry, I was typing. Can you say that
again? No worries. So my question is this actually a pattern that can be formed within this working group, or is just like a one-off thing? That's
no, that's one of the patterns. It's just you'd ask, what is the most urgent thing? And so I'd fit, CI builds, which also it's already being worked on, is probably the most urgent one because of the primary key issue.
So it looks like we have a one pattern now. Any volunteers for DRI?
I think the database team is already working on that. So I don't know if that's Andreas, or I know Gregors is working on it as well. So either one of them. Don't be shy. One of you raise your hand and say, put my name in there.
I'm not going to name anyone before. I mean, I'm counting. 3.
Yeah, I'll be happy to work on that. Just one thing to mention is that the verify rapid action kind of, is consuming my focus a little bit. So, but after it's done, like I will definitely focus on the CI builds.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, rapid action is a short-term goal, and this one we imagine it will. At least we still have the Q1 to sort out the blueprints. Cool. Thank you, Grigor. Next one. Well, we have 1 minute, but Andreas, your question.
We don't have to talk about this now. This is more of a detailed question
Okay.
about. I think it comes up with the data access layer. Let's skip that for now.
Cool. I'll skip my question. And Eric, you have exit criteria.
Yeah, I keep thinking we've sort of tried this before, and I think we end up misapplying our iteration value. Like we're really good at doing small things, and so we end up in this local minima of we relieve the immediate pressure, we respond to incidents or something like that. And we haven't been successful cracking this problem. So I don't have any prescription, but there's some ideas in here from conversations I had yesterday. My skip level with Christopher reports, and then with Sid, about how we might frame this where there's no way to satisfy the exit criteria just by doing the short-term stuff or even the midterm stuff. You know, at the end of the day, this needs to feel more like the GCP migration project than like past times we've relieved database pressure. This should be a big deal. I don't want to be so prescriptive. I'm saying like it's sharding and this is the shard key or something like that. I'm trying to avoid that, but I'm trying to set the boundaries so that we don't just, you know, 2 months from now, we're wrapping this up of like, oh, we raised capacity, we can go back to our day job sort of thing. That's happened 2 or 3 times in the past. And then also in E, we have a really unique constraint where we, you know, like most people that run an enterprise grade SaaS don't ship their code to other people to run. We're open core. And so we have to have some exit criteria around, you know, again, I don't want to be too prescriptive and say this thing has to be a shim that goes in between a vanilla database and our application code as it stands today, but something around like just minimizing or eliminating the complexity for what we ship to self-managed customers. Because I think even the largest self-managed customers, like the 50K reference architecture, is still like at least an order of magnitude away from needing sharding, right? So I think it's genuine to say like GitLab.com is the only one that needs sharding. But that means in the worst sense, we might accidentally create sort of a fork, like a totally different database interface. And then GitLab.com becomes a really poor use case for testing our code before we ship it to self-managed users. And we talked about things like Citus data in the past, which kind of has this shim sort of functionality. They've since been acquired by Microsoft. So I think we're all feeling like, well, if that was ever an option, now they're probably just going to become Azure's version of AWS Aurora or something like that. So it's probably not good to rely on a vendor for it, but maybe something that works in a similar sort of fashion is a way to think about how to reduce that complexity. But I think we really need to do 2 things at the end of the day: prevent ourselves from just doing short and midterm stuff, and then also make sure we preserve the simplicity with what we're shipping to self-managed customers.
Yeah, I can definitely be more specific and concrete about those goals. I mean, those are in mind, right? As in, I'm keeping in mind the fact that the code base is the same and we're shipping self-managed, but I can definitely be more explicit about that. I think, you know, that this is normally a challenge, and for us it's an even bigger challenge because we do ship self-managed, which I think is actually pretty unique. There are ways to make things logically in the application look like you're sharding, but it's still one box. And then all that logic lives in the application itself, where the application is talking to multiple databases that you don't have a spring of, you know, a mushroom cloud of little databases and self-managed. So I'll submit an MR to be more explicit about that.
Great, thanks.
My question.
On the 10X, I think one thing we can do is to have something more concrete, is to see if we could make it run on smaller hardware. You know, can GitLab.com be shrank down from next to the biggest thing we have to something smaller because now we've distributed the load? And that might be a more tangible thing to measure, because otherwise scalability is like this very, as you say, it's very abstract, and 10X doesn't really reflect that. So food for thought. Sorry, Tune, I interrupted you twice.
No problem at all. Who wants to drive this exit criteria discussion?
It's Jerry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And before we go, I had the one last question. What are the goals and deliverables for next meeting? I think update on primary key migration is probably just something we can do a quick blurb in the meeting agenda every week as to where we are, what the progress is, or any roadblocks.
That sounds a near-term achievable goals. What about the blueprint of the null pattern here?
The composable code base is pretty close to being merged. So I think, I don't know if next week is too soon, but I think it's pretty clear and pretty close.
And also more samples.
Or what?
More samples for the pattern more samples for discovering the pattern.
Yeah, I just added that. I'm
Okay.
I'm on point for that.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, we're over time. So that's it for today. Next meeting we'll change the agenda format to the top. What is specified at the top of the document.
Okay, I'll transcribe this to the other agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.